Our two speakers today, or presenters today, and I'll have you each give maybe 2 or 3 minutes about what you do, who you are, in addition to what I mentioned. So we'll start with Justin, since you were the first to show up today. So Justin McGreary is the founder and professor of Paideia Prep, an online college prep academy that fuses academic preparation with Christian worldview. He's also the director and an assistant professor of Christian studies at John Witherspoon College. Previously, he was the program director at Chesterton House, a Christian study center at Cornell University, and pastoral assistant at New Life Presbyterian Church. He has completed studies in both the U.S. and the UK. Justin is married to Melanie, also an entrepreneur and owner of her own private piano studio. In their free time, they read novels out loud together, go for hikes, travel, enjoy hosting friends and neighbors, and are actively involved in their church. Justin, would you tell us a little bit about yourself? You can turn on the mic there. It takes just a couple seconds to activate.
Is that good? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm originally from the Pittsburgh area, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised, and I went to Geneva College and studied literature. And after that, I moved up to Ithaca, New York, where I took a position working with the Chesterton House, which is a Christian study center at Cornell University, and I was there for a few years. And then I moved down to Southern California and did my master's work in biblical and theological studies at Westminster Seminary. I moved back to Ithaca, New York, where I continued to work with the Chesterton House for a few more years. And then at that point, I met Melanie. We dated for a little bit, and then we moved out here to be near her sister and brother-in-law, which is how we ended up in Rapid City, all the way from the East Coast. So I currently teach at John Witherspoon College in their Christian Studies department. So I teach theology classes, biblical studies classes. I'm teaching 2 Greek courses this coming fall. And I'm enrolled with the Union School of Theology over in Great Britain. So, anything there?
That should be good. Awesome. Thank you. Judy is our next presenter, and she began her career in adult education with a 13-year stint at the Pennington County Jail. I hope that's on this side of the bars, right, Judy? 26 years later, she continues to teach in the GED program at the Career Learning Center of the Black Hills. She and her husband own a ranch east of Rapid City and have 3 adult sons and 4 grandchildren. Other interests include church activities, music, reading, and yard work. And I have to let you know, she taught both my kids piano. Tell us a little bit about you, Judy.
Well, I grew up on a ranch east of Rapid City where my grandparents homesteaded. And our family was very much a family who worked together. So every day started with chores and ended with chores. I spent many hours in a tractor, and I know how scoop shovels and pitchforks function. Well, since we are here in this amazing educational facility, I will tell you that my siblings and I rode horseback 3.5 miles to a country school where we pumped our drinking water out of the cistern and we used outhouses. So I have seen a lot of change in education. I have always enjoyed teaching. I had a rhythm band when I was in grade school, and in high school I volunteered to help the teachers in the elementary classroom. So education has always kind of been on the forefront for me. I attended the University of Sioux Falls and graduated with my BA, and a week later I got my MRS. And as Deanna said, my husband and I live on the family ranch, and we do have 3 adult sons, and our 4 grandchildren live very conveniently next door to us. I've had a variety of opportunities to teach. I've taught K through 12, classes at church, private piano, and 13 years at Pennington County Jail. When I had the opportunity to connect with adult education, I was hooked. The 13 years at Pennington County Jail were very, very interesting. I taught in their GED program there, and then due to funding changes, I switched over to the Career Learning Center. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Career Learning Center is that we get to focus on the individual student. So when a student comes in, we assess where they are in reading or math, and then we set a course of study for them and help them prepare for the GED. I have a tremendous team of teachers that I get to work with there, and most of our students come in with a lot of baggage, and so one of our main objectives is to establish a relationship with those students so that they are open to sharing what's going on in their life and trying to help them work through the barriers so that we can concentrate on education. Another thing that I love is being able to start where they are. If a student comes in with an 11th or 12th grade reading level, then we can give them a practice test. If they do well, they can go take the test. So basically our goal is to get them in and out of our program as quickly as they want to. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about adult ed.
Awesome. Thanks for your introductions, both of you. Just a reminder for our audience members, phones, remember to silence them, and actually full silence because the vibrations actually come through the recording. So if you can take a moment to do that. It reminded me because I've got my phone in my hand with all of my questions that I'm going to ask these very educated folks and experienced people. And a reminder, when we do get to open up the questions to the audience, I'm going to ask them a few questions that I've got prepared for them. When we open them up, remember to state your name as well so that we get to know you a little bit better and where you're from, and then ask your question. So the first question I have is for Justin. What are the top ways parents can prepare their children for academic success? And for audience members, remember maybe to be writing things down. If you're listening by Facebook, of course, you can pop in a message there for your questions as well. And think of things or questions that might relate to yourself if you're looking for more education, or maybe family members, or even coworkers or business partners. So Justin, what are the top ways parents can prepare their children for academic success?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it's kind of interesting when you actually look at the things that students get coached on when they go off to campus, or particularly college campuses, and sometimes as a parent you feel like, well, they're going to go off and they're going to study all the stuff that maybe I don't know anything about. But really, most of the stuff that sets students up for academic success is like life skills. Things like time management, learning how to focus on what you're doing instead of being distracted by your phone frequently. How do you handle stress? Those are some of the things that actually are probably the most helpful in helping a student be successful, aside from encouraging students to take advantage of resources that will further develop them in more specific, like academic ways. For example, learning how to read and how to write. Like the most fundamental, like if you play baseball, you got to be able to catch the ball, you got to be able to hit a ball. In college, you got to be able to read a book and you got to be able to write about it. But so many things happen besides that help students be successful. Knowing how to handle money. There's all sorts of really practical things I think go into helping students be successful when it comes to college life that aren't really all that different from being successful in life in general. And it's amazing how many young people don't have some of those basic skills, because high school, in contrast with, say, the college campus, is pretty rigorously laid out for them. When you get to college, so many students are not capable of actually managing themselves. They're not able to actually know how to put together a daily schedule that will set them up for success. So I would say, oddly enough, there's nothing super exceptional to helping your student be successful in college than if you're going to be successful in other areas of life. So that would be my initial response to that.
Awesome. So I know both of you are in a different level of education. Of course, Justin, you're focused on the higher education, and Judy, you're launching people to get their high school degree so they can go on to do higher education if they choose. Give us some basics on how people get their GED, Judy. Like, how much does it cost and how long will it take?
The GED costs $130. There are 4 tests, the reasoning through the language arts, math, science, and social studies. Each subtest costs $32.50. The test is computerized. The student registers online and pays online. They can take as many of the tests in one day as they wish, or they may take one test at a time. Here in South Dakota, there is no expiration. As long as the 2014 test is in place, they can take 1 year, 5 years, 10 years to get their test, and those subtests are still, those scores are still active. How long does it take? That depends on what level the student is when they are coming to class. There may be some people out there who are ready to take the test, can go online and just sign up and take the test. Many of our students come in and have completed several years of high school. Those students, if they come in and test at a 10, 11, 12th grade reading level, are probably close to ready to take the test. We have students who come in and might be enrolled in our class from as short a time as 4 weeks and will complete. We have students who have been there several years. Some of them have stopped out and then have returned, but it all is individual based on where the student is.
Awesome, thank you. One more question for you, Justin, and then we'll open it up for the audience, and I'll just fill in if you guys get quiet and can't think of any specific questions. Justin, what are some of the best academic resources for students these days? Academic resources.
I was thinking about, like, what are some of the really concrete things that are really helpful? If you have a student that's going off to college, one of the things is almost every single college campus is going to have something like a career center, a writing center, a learning center. But there are some schools that are small enough that they don't have those kind of robust resources. But I would say the internet is amazing because you can go now and pretty much every major university will have all that kind of stuff online. So if you have a student going off to college and they're interested in, okay, I want to be successful in all sorts of things, whether it's academics or learn how to write, learn how to take notes, learn how to give a presentation. The major universities like Harvard, Princeton, Dartmouth, Oxford, you name it, all have major web pages devoted to giving you PDFs, videos, all sorts of things that give you great tips on how to be a good college student. It's honestly amazing. And I mean, even YouTube, for example, if you can think of something that you think, man, that'd be a great resource. If only there was somebody who would give presentations on how to give presentations, it's on YouTube, So there's so much at your fingertips with the web. So that's my number one. I would also say one thing to seriously consider as far as a resource, whether you actually do it or not, but it kind of spurs some creative thinking, is gap year programs. A lot of students really don't know what they want to be when they grow up, and they feel this incredible pressure to figure that out their senior year of high school. But a gap year can be an incredibly valuable time for thinking, reflection, growth, and there are a lot of programs out there. Some of them are very expensive, some of them are not. So I would look up gap year programs. There's any number of other great resources. Being someone who's not really technologically savvy, I love books, and there are some great books out there. And one of the ones I really like to promote with my students, and I did bring it, is this book titled The Universe Next Door by James Dyer. He's a great author, but this book, the subtitle is A Basic Worldview Catalog, and I would say that this book essentially gives you a general picture of the different belief systems that you will encounter in college. And that, I think, is actually one of the most important things for students to seriously think about, is what they believe and why. Because when you go off to college, the main goal is not to get a degree. The main goal is to get an education. And if you don't know what you believe, you are going to have a lot of difficulty making sense of the big picture of reality. And this book, I would just say, it's written from a Christian vantage point, but the book is used in both Christian and non-Christian university classes, and he gives his reasons why he believes what he believes. And if you go off to college and you never engage people in the conversation about the most fundamental questions of life, I would say you have not gotten an education. And so this is a great book, a great resource, I think, for any student launching off to college to start thinking about why anything.
Awesome. Great list of resources. Well, now that you guys have, and ladies, have heard a little bit of background about both our presenters and what they do, heard some answers about what they focus on and some resources that they can bring, I want to open it up to all of you. Randy has the microphone, so just raise your hand and I can either jog over to you with another mic, or Randy can get your question to you. But remember, let us know who you are, where you're with, and let us know your question. Who would like to start us off? Two of ours.
My name is Jack Sitch. I'm a video and film producer. I run JSA Productions LLC, and I'm a former teacher. So hopefully I won't step on any toes as I ask this question. One of the things that I run across, and I think the two of you will probably have a separate view here. That's just my assumption because one is more an adult and one is more in college level. A lot of vocations that are out in this world won't need a 4-year degree, won't need a 2-year degree. Many times it's just learning the life skills or the apprenticeships and stuff. So I really want to just get you guys' perspective on the difference and the need for either or both from your vantage point as a college professor, as an adult and educator, on the differences and what kind of students really are going to benefit in which direction you want to go.
I'll jump in first here. Definitely seeing the need for workers in the technical field. So we work very closely with Western Dakota, and in fact our graduations are now held at their facility, and we are trying to do what is called a soft handoff with them. So we have partnered with them where we take our students out there for tours. That is one of the things that we will do, and is to help them assess what they want to do. Many of our students, rather than going on to 4-year, will start with at least with a technical or an apprenticeship. So we try to, in building that relationship, and as we are heading towards the GED, is not to have that be our final goal, but furthering education, however that looks for that particular student.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and right now, because of the cost of, say, college, lots of people are thinking really seriously about, is the price ticket that I'm gonna pay for these 4 years really worth it? And the truth of the matter is many colleges are so expensive that students might get a great job, but are still gonna spend years catching up to what they paid for that degree. And I would say I'm very sympathetic, though I think that, say, studying the humanities, literature and history are so valuable for learning to think and understand what it is to be human, that the cost is very high. I mean, at Witherspoon, one of the things that we're regularly fighting is to keep a degree affordable for students, because we do think it's valuable, but not, we don't want to lock students in by making it expensive. So I would say, I think that also different students learn different ways, and a lot of colleges say book learning, and a lot of students aren't geared for that. Now there's a lot of development in thinking through how do you help folks, different people with different learning styles learn. But it still is, I would say, slanted towards students who like to read or need to learn how to read. The curriculum is, and there are some students who are just great with their hands, and they books are not their thing, but they are really good with, you show them something or you give them the chance to fiddle with whatever it is, an engine or a machine, and they're great. And I think that it's great for students to think about what are their strengths and pursue those, especially when if they're thinking about career, because I think that there is a difference between thinking about career and thinking about just general education, if I can make that distinction. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can I do a quick follow-up on that?
Sure. And then
If you were
Marie's got our
talking
next question.
to parents, both of you, if you were talking to parents of a student, how would you lead them into helping their student initially start making that choice on which way to go? Is there something that you think would be important?
Sorry.
I think the first thing would be, where the students' interests are. For many of our students, it's pretty evident whether or not they are really students, if they like to study just because they like to learn, or if the only reason they are there is to get that GED or to get the job. So learning what their strengths are, and some of that we are able to focus on through career interests and through working with the Department of Labor, but determining what their goals are. And for some of them, it's even perhaps coming out here, here or at Western Dakota, taking a tour and seeing what's available. Because I think a lot of these young people don't really know the different things that you can do as a teacher in the medical field, in the electrical field. They just have a very narrow view of what it is. So I think looking at some of those things, determining what their strengths are, and maybe opening some doors, because I know several of our students have said, no, I would never be able to do that. No one in my family has done that, so I would never be able to do that. But showing them, the possibilities.
Yeah, I would probably echo. I think oftentimes the debate comes down to should you encourage your student to pursue their passions or their strengths? Especially if they're I was actually talking with my brother-in-law about this last night. I read an article. Steve Jobs gave this address at Stanford, which was essentially, life is short, do what you like, and work hard at it. And there are some studies that have come out saying, actually, okay, maybe some people like Steve Jobs get to do what they like, but if you want to be successful, you've got to do what you're good at, is kind of the other argument. And so I would actually say, well, I don't know why you'd have to separate them. Help your student, your child, think about both of those things and see what might work, which is essentially and I would say the other thing is with regards to strengths and weaknesses, take into consideration what are the learning styles of your student, and that doesn't have to mean then, oh, well, you're a hands-on kind of learner, you'll never go to college. I don't think that that's then the conclusion, but you have to be realistic. Like, okay, it's always been difficult for you to read. Well, what can we do to help you if you really want to be a literature teacher, but you've always just been really good with your hands? What is it going to take to move in that direction? So I would say taking into consideration the passion as well as sort of the strengths.
Thank you.
Great.
Good morning. Marie Strang with Edward Jones. Good to see you again, Justin. Nice to meet you, Judy. I want to circle back around to cost because basically every other question was taken. So I scrambled for two more, but just a little bit about me. I have a 22-year-old, almost 22-year-old stepdaughter, currently enrolled at University of Colorado in Denver, and I have a 2-year-old. And then I myself paid for my education. My gap year program was called Join the Army. It has a better name now. But I am concerned about the cost of a 4-year education, and I kind of go back to, man, if my 2-year-old can go to school for 9 months and get a certification, that's amazing, but there's value in exactly what you said, the experience of being on a college campus, having those debates, having exposure to all the different social aspects maybe of a more traditional 4-year college. So talk to us a little bit about, one, Judy, how you keep students who are just achieving their GED and looking at furthering their education. How do you help them overcome the fears of cost? And then tell us a little bit more about what John Witherspoon is doing, because you mentioned it briefly and I'm familiar with it, but I think it's a great value for students currently looking at a traditional 4-year program.
Many of our students come from a low-income background, not all, but many of them. And for many of them, even obtaining a high school degree, whether that be a GED, they may be the first one in their family who has done that. So college and furthering their education is not something that they talk about at home. They also don't have the resources to pay for that. So working with Western Dakota or through the state with the Dakota Build program has been huge, because if they qualify for that, they can get their 2-year degree completely paid for. We have had several students who, once they realize that they can do continuing education and get some kind of a degree, have gone into that program, and it has been exciting to see them complete that and go on. The other thing is moving into an apprenticeship program, and several of our students have done that. Also, if they choose to go on to a 4-year, then most of them will qualify for financial aid, and we have someone who works very closely with us who will help them do the paperwork for that.
Yeah, this is such a key practical question. And I would say one other resource that actually I thought of that might be helpful for a college student going off is there's a website, online program called You Need a Budget. And essentially, not only do they provide you software for budgeting, but they also have free, well, it's not free, you pay us for a subscription, but they have online courses on how to budget and how to think through these sorts of things, and it's free for first-year college students. So for all of college, okay, I thought it was for 1 year. So for all of college, you can do this for free. So You Need a Budget, ynab.com.org. Really helpful resource. But at Witherspoon, we actually have switched from sort of a pay per credit to a $300 a month for full-time students, which comes out to $3,600 for a school year. we're attempting to do this, switch to this model in order to keep the education affordable for students. And we also try to not, add on tons of bells and whistles at the moment to the education. We try to focus on the classroom. We want the students to spend their money learning, not on any number of other things. So, yeah, great question, thank you.
One other thing that doesn't apply for our students at the Career Learning Center, but I don't know if a lot of parents are aware of it, but students, dual enrollment is becoming very, very popular. I know of one incoming freshman who is starting at a university here in South Dakota with 30 credits already. A family member of ours did all of her undergrad and is starting with her undergrad completely done, going directly into the nursing program. And she accomplished all of that while she was in high school, and the cost is minimal. So that is very different now. So a great opportunity for these kids if they can do that.
That's great.
Monique has a question. Randy, do you have the mic? Oh, check. Thank you.
Monique Stevens. Monique Stevens with South Dakota State University and the Continuing and Distance Education Program. So I'm very familiar with this area. What is going to happen to our society when we have a lot of people saying, oh, I don't need a 4-year degree, it didn't help my mom and dad? Well, they're not working at McDonald's or Walmart, and they're not realizing that the education that they have got them into a career, maybe not their $100,000 a year job, but that their education did help them not have to work shift type work. How are we as a society going to be in 15 or 20 years when we have a bunch of uneducated folks who don't think they need education, and those of us who are going to then be in the oldest generation go, wait a minute, we're going backwards. How can we, even though it's not affordable, how can we educate them without necessarily leaving them uneducated?
That's a great question.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think even in the job skills training piece that I do through the Career Learning Center, one of the things we try to focus on is lifelong learning. So I think that it's not just about the job. So even if we are encouraging students to go into more of a technical field, regardless of the area we are in, our goal should be always to be learning. And as Justin mentioned, learning about the world, learning about the environment, the society that we live in, who we are. It's not just about that job. So it's that mindset of education, eagerness to learn.
Yeah, I think that there is value in a 4-year degree, particularly I'm personally sold on the liberal arts. So our company, Paideia, actually the word comes from the Greek concept that education should be for the whole person in order to form them into citizens, not just sort of fill their brains with facts, but form them into citizens. And then actually that term ended up being taken by Christians later on. It was a Greek idea, and it was geared largely towards the aristocracy, because those were the only people that were going to lead society. But the Christians took this idea of holistic education and valued it. And that's where we got the name. We wanted our students to not just learn some academic or skills, but to their mind be excited by the thought of learning, and thinking beyond just me, and what I would say, think with big picture Christianity, which does care about your neighbor, which does care about what's going on in the world. And I do think that, I do think in one sense in higher education, people are still trying to market higher education to people, and often it is usually with, you can make so much money, which I think is a limited, narrow picture of success. And I think that in one sense, those of us in four-year colleges can betray the goal of education, not the degree, by saying, look, if you do this, you'll have a better career track. But I think in some ways, learning how can we convince people of the value of reading widely and engaging in these larger, important conversations to care about where our society is headed. I think it's a really important question, and I'm not sure that I have I think maybe sometimes working harder, thinking harder about how can we communicate that as a value to people, like that's creating this question, and not just marketing a career. Because I would say that because of the whole tech industry, it's totally blowing out four-year colleges, because you really can make more money if you take 1 or 2 years learning how to really know the ins and outs of computer software, and you really don't need to spend all the money for a four-year degree. So I think that we need to rethink how we even advertise what we're trying to accomplish.
Don't you just love how a panel can go from one type of question to another type of question? I'm going to throw in a lighter weight question, and then we'll get back to you folks back there. What is your favorite part of your work, and what excites you? What's your favorite part of your work, and what excites you?
Well, every day is different. We call ourselves sometimes problem solvers. We have to solve the problems and eliminate the barriers before we can actually teach. But some of the fun moments are a student saying after they completed their GED, that is the first time in my life I've ever finished anything. Or having one of our students, a young woman who was homeless, when she started coming to classes, she got a job and was riding her bicycle through the snow to her job and completed her GED, enrolled at Western Dakota, completed a 2-year program there, and to be able to go to her graduation at Western Dakota was absolutely amazing. There were lots of tears. And to have a student who said his math teacher had him in front of the class and told him he was too stupid to ever learn math. And so he just absolutely has a mental block towards math. And to be able to sit down and to work with him through that, and then when he passed his math test, it was pretty exciting. So those are some of the things that on a day-to-day basis just are the joys of being in that kind of a program.
Yeah, I would say somewhat similar. What I love about teaching is when a light goes on for a student, when they have that aha moment, like, oh, that's why this has to do with that, or that, I think. So I had this summer, we for Paideia, we had a course called Reading Religion, in which we were just looking at what different folks believe. And one of the things, at the end, the students had to give a presentation, kind of reflecting on one of the readings that they had. And one of the students, we had read about ancient Gnosticism, and which seems really kind of unrelated to anything today, but it actually is. And one of the things that she said was, in her presentation, she was like, I've always wrestled with the question, how do I know that the New Testament is reliable? And in actually digging into the debate between Gnosticism and Christianity, or Gnostic forms of Christianity, she found that the manuscript history way outweighs the canonical Gospels, way outweighs the Gnostic text that we have. And so she did her own thinking, her own researching and thinking through the question, and it was like you saw, oh, she was figuring things out. And that, I think, is just what I enjoy most about teaching.
JD?
JD Henderson with Rango Construction Company. My question is going to dovetail somewhat thematically with what you've already been touching on, but you were talking about the formation of the entire person, not only intellectually, but practically and spiritually. And so, you find in our society all these different ways that people are utilizing to prepare their kids in this way. You've got the homeschooling community, you've got the private school community, and you've got the public school community, but it often seems like the MO is very different amongst these, what I would say, what I would call the basic three types. And so you have a lot, perhaps in the homeschooling community, that are going towards this classical education. It's Latin, it's literature, it's the formation of the whole person. It's got religion, it's got spirituality involved. I know people that are involved in all three different kinds of systems. And, but I'm hearing, for instance, in certain private schools where you would think that there would be, a greater rounded formation, that they're really just sort of cranking them out, like you said, to be like, okay, we are going to be completely academically superior, and when you get out of here, you're going to get a great job. And that's what we're all about. Some of the things that you're talking, we are living in pretty much a post-Christian society, and so a lot of these aspects of education that you're talking about are becoming more of like a subculture. And so in your own perspective, do you see, as these students are coming in, the different challenges that they may have coming from the different types of formation that they have come from, whether it be homeschooling, public, what have you? And then do you see, you're kind of calling for this renaissance of perspective in the culture, but one of the challenges that I see to like a classic education is that, these children are coming out into a world that is not embracing that. A world that is basically saying, no, it's big time tech, it's big time money, or get out of my way, I don't have time for this literature and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm just, we homeschool in my family, and so I see that as one of the things that's like, okay, how is this going to play out and have application for them in this society that is this glacier that's sort of opposing, this holistic perspective? That's a really long question, but I think you see what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's there's a lot in the question, because I think that it does get to the heart of some of the really challenging foundational issues in society, as well as just even practical. One of the things that societies, especially as they become more diverse, one of the big questions is, how do you live with different people? And in the United States, one of the things that we've done in attempts to address that question is to create, sort of a strong distinction between what we call sort of the public sphere and the private sphere. Like the public sphere is marked by sort of facts, reason, the things that we can all agree on is the goal, and other things like what your religious beliefs are to kind of stay in the sort of the private sector. Lots of different folks are kind of trying to come up with ways, how can we address the fact that we don't live in a homogenous society. We don't live with everybody coming from the same place. And I think that one area where you'll never be able to escape this issue is ethics. Like, every now and again, some major company will do something wildly unethical, and which makes people think, okay, well, we need to rethink how we're doing this, because we're trying to keep certain things that seem sort of not things that were considered values and not facts out, and then you have an ethical catastrophe, which makes people feel like, okay, we got to have some agreed upon group of beliefs. I would say, going back more to as they are coming out of their homes or whatever their educational background is, if they're homeschooled, I would say, I think that it is often a challenge to know, what does it look like to that, say, if they're homeschooled and coming out of, say, a Christian background, which is what I am more familiar with. Yeah, what do you do when you go into a business sector and you're faced, say, maybe an ethical question? It's not easy, and I think that people need to be ready to just, in some ways, deal with the fact that that is just the way things are. You might be in situations, you will be in situations where you're not going to agree with people, and what are you going to do? I think that the important thing is to, if it's unethical, to address what's unethical, and just be like, well, I'll just keep that to myself, because there are ramifications for people. I was in a situation where I was working for an employer that I did not agree with things, and I was open with some of the things I did not agree with. It was pretty tense at times, and not pleasant. But I think that parents need to help their students, and this is where I do think the holistic education is really valuable, and it creates different problems for different people. If you grow up in this learning that you kind of keep personal things or ethics or religion to yourself, you'll face different issues. You might fit in better with some of the larger ethos of companies, but you're still going to have issues, I would say. Sorry, this is kind of like this is in my mind one of the biggest issues probably in society in general, and everybody is wrestling with it from a different vantage point. I would say this: one of the things in Paideia is we're thinking of preparing students for colleges. We don't want students to be obnoxious. We want people to learn how to engage and talk with each other who are different and don't agree. I think the ability to disagree on your convictions but still demonstrate that you care for somebody and value them is super important, regardless of what the end outcome would be, is if that makes sense. Being able to actually care, but also be able to talk about it. I think so many people just don't even know how to talk, and so what you end up having is people just shouting at each other and not listening to each other. So being able to actually disagree on convictions, but maintain your convictions if you're not convinced that someone else is right. So I'm sorry, that's just kind of like all over the place. If there's something you'd like to add.
We'll have one more question, then we'll wrap it up, Marie.
Well, this one's way easier. As lifelong learners, I know your educational journey is not over, but looking back on your journey so far, what's been your biggest regret?
That was easier.
Educationally, I don't know. I think that the one thing I guess that I have learned that I like about where I am working now is starting where the student is, and that is one thing that really I struggle with the public and sometimes even in the private sector in the classroom, where every student has to do the same thing regardless of their capabilities. And unfortunately, we end up with some of those students who are very, very bright students but could not tolerate the classroom because they did not fit in the box. And I know that's generalizing, that there are a lot of excellent teachers out there, and when you have 30 to 40 kids, you have to do what works for 30 to 40 kids. But when you get these kids who are really, really bright, and I struggled with this with one of my own sons, and had I known then what I know now, I think I could have saved him and his teachers a lot of grief, because he was sitting in a classroom doing stuff that he did not, or not doing stuff that he should have been doing. So I think that's one of the big things, is being able to work with people where they are and go forward.
I think personally, as far as like being a lifelong learner, my biggest regret is that at times I wasn't more focused in my own work. Like, you know, some of the books that are coming out now about like deep work, you know, this idea of really focused. I wish I could have taken things like that and applied it to my own studies, because I think that sometimes I just like learning, so I just like get distracted, like chasing different butterflies, rather than be like, I want to do this well. So I would say that that's being more focused.
Awesome, great questions. Give the panelists a round of applause.